Could be in the making in the Vatican as speculation grows over who might be the next leader of the Catholic Church.
Pope Francis is dead. And for the first time in 1,500 years, an African could take the throne of St. Peter. But is the Vatican truly ready to break its oldest tradition? Or will history be denied once again? Let's find out. Every living cardinal under the age of 80 is now a potential kingmaker. Every whisper in the Apostolic Palace is a calculated move. Every handshake may conceal a knife. And at the heart of it all lies a question with global consequences. Who will take the throne of the most powerful spiritual institution in human history? For centuries, the answer has been simple. A European man, preferably Italian, with theological credentials and political caution. But this time, something is different. The conversation has taken an unexpected turn. For the first time in modern history, the name of Africa is echoing through marble corridors, once reserved for monarchs and martyrs. But why now? Because Francis is gone. And Francis changed everything. Not just in public gestures, washing the feet of prisoners, kissing the sick, but in institutional DNA. He altered the makeup of the cardinalate. He appointed voices from places that Rome had long overlooked. The barrios of Latin America, the slums of Manila, the forests of Congo. He didn't name his successor, but he reshaped the battlefield. Now, the conclave that gathers in the Sistine Chapel isn't just filled with aging European bishops, it's filled with cardinals from the global south, men forged not in seminaries of privilege, but in trenches of poverty, oppression, and spiritual hunger. Many of them are young, many are African, and many have never known a church that didn't look to Rome for permission. They have their own answers now, and some of them want a pope who does too. But desire is not destiny. Because the Vatican is not a church, it is also a court. It does not move with faith alone, it moves with calculation, with caution, and with centuries of fear disguised as tradition. And though the College of Cardinals has changed in face, the logic of its power remains deeply European. Let's talk numbers. Of the 137 cardinals eligible to vote, only 21 are from Africa. That's 15%, far less than the continent's 20% share of the global Catholic population. On the surface, that's a problem of math, but underneath, it's a problem of perception. In conclave tradition, African cardinals are often courted, rarely considered. They are treated as vote givers, not vote winners. They are given respect in ceremony, not strategy. And yet their presence is growing, their voices are louder, and this time some of them are not content to play the supporting role. The dynamics are shifting, but Rome remembers. It remembers that the last African pope was over 1,500 years ago, and that even he, Pope Gelasius III, was born in what is now Algeria, long before black and white carried modern political meaning. Since then, the Vatican has closed ranks. It has watched revolutions, empires, and global Christianity spread, but it has never allowed that spread to reach the papal crown. And yet now, in 2025, the wind has changed. Outside the Vatican walls, Africa is rising. Not in metaphor, in measurable facts. Catholicism in Nigeria, Congo, Kenya, and Ghana is growing at exponential rates. African seminaries are overflowing, while European ones shut down. African clergy are being sent to Europe as missionaries, a full-circle reversal of colonial history. This is not just symbolic, it is systemic. The center of gravity in global Catholicism is moving southward, and Rome knows it. But acknowledging that shift is one thing. Electing a pope from that new center? That's a risk that some in the conclave are willing to take, and others are desperate to prevent. Because the papacy is not just about faith, it's about finance, diplomacy, secrecy, image, and power. The moment an African pope appears on that balcony, it will send tremors through every Catholic institution, from cathedrals in Paris to presidential palaces in Washington. Some see it as liberation, others as the beginning of chaos. Which is why, before Africa's name can even be raised seriously, Rome must ask itself, is it ready to let go? Ready to let go of centuries of control? Ready to let go of the illusion that holiness is white? Ready to let go of a world it no longer leads? Because now, With the throne of St. Peter unoccupied and the ghosts of the past circling the Sistine Chapel, the Church is being asked to answer not just a spiritual question but a moral one. Will it finally crown the future, or will it protect the past? If the seat of power is empty, and the ghosts of popes past haunt the corridors of the Vatican, the next question is both urgent and unavoidable. Why Africa? Why now? Because it's no longer just about inclusion, it's about reality. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. In the past, African candidacies were treated as symbolic nods, ceremonial, almost patronizing acknowledgments of the continent's devotion. A gentle applause from the balcony, but never a serious whisper inside the conclave. But the world has changed. And now, for the Catholic Church, Africa is no longer an accessory. It is the artery. Let's begin with what the Church can no longer ignore: hard numbers. Africa is home to over 272 million Catholics, making up more than 1/5 of the global flock. But what matters more is the trajectory. While churches in Europe are being turned into museums and cafes, in Africa, they are being built by the dozens, not because of nostalgia, but because of necessity. Sunday Mass in Lagos is standing room only. In Kinshasa, choirs overflow. In Nairobi, parishes compete to hold the largest youth retreats. This isn't growth, it's a spiritual eruption. And it's not just at the bottom, it's climbing up the ranks. African seminaries are packed with young men answering the call, while seminaries in Germany, France, and Ireland struggle to fill rooms. African priests are now being exported to Europe, not as a gesture of exchange, but as a lifeline for dying parishes in the West. If the Vatican were a business and the Pope a CEO, the shareholders would be screaming, "Invest in Africa." But the case for an African Pope isn't just numerical, it's moral. It's about leadership formed in fire. Unlike many of their Western counterparts, African clergy do not lead from comfortable offices. They serve amid conflict zones, epidemics, collapsed economies, political repression, and religious insurgency. They don't read about persecution, they bury the bodies of their congregants. They don't theorize poverty, they live beside it. They don't pontificate about faith in adversity. They preach with power cuts, food shortages, and gunfire in the distance. What the Church often calls pastoral sensitivity, Africa calls survival with dignity. Take, for instance, the explosive rise of Pentecostalism and Islamic revivalism in parts of Africa. The Catholic Church is not winning by default, it's competing. African bishops are learning to evangelize not in post-Christian complacency, but in the fierce, vibrant market of religious conviction. Every Mass is a battle for attention, for relevance, for spiritual truth, and they're winning it with grit, not gimmicks. This breeds a different kind of clergy, a pope cut from a different cloth. One who knows what it's like to stand in floodwaters and deliver a homily. One who has faced off with warlords and stood between soldiers and civilians. One who knows that the faith survives not because of Vatican financing, but because of local courage. But beyond demographics and suffering lies the heart of the matter: symbolism. Electing an African pope would be a shattering of mirrors, the moment the Catholic Church stops reflecting its past and begins reflecting its people. It would mean that Catholicism is no longer centered in the ruins of European Christendom, but reborn in the soil of the global South. It would be a recognition that Rome is not the only holy ground, that the Spirit speaks in Swahili, sings in Lingala, and marches through the streets of Accra. It would also be an act of historical reckoning. The Church was complicit in colonialism, often a chaplain to the empire. It baptized conquerors while ignoring the crucified. But an African pope would be a reversal of that betrayal. A declaration that the continent once enslaved, once evangelized at gunpoint, now leads the evangelizers. Of course, such a shift wouldn't just echo within the Church. It would thunder across the world stage, a black pope standing on the balcony of St. Peter's would be more than religious theater. It would rewrite global perceptions of race, of authority, of sacredness. It would do what centuries of dialogue never could: put Africa at the center of the world's moral imagination. This matters in a time when black leadership is still questioned, when African voices are still dismissed as fringe, when the scars of colonial faith still ache beneath whitewashed saints. A pope from Africa wouldn't be just a face, he'd be a fault line, one that separates old from new, one that would force the church and the world to ask itself, what does holiness look like now? This is not just about justice or representation, it's about survival. The Catholic Church is hemorrhaging relevance in the West. It's facing scandals, aging leadership, and cultural rejection. Africa offers not just fresh blood, it offers a second chance. And yet, if the argument for an African pope is so strong, why has it not yet happened? Why, despite the numbers, the need, and the moment, does Rome still hesitate? The Vatican may be secretive, but it is not silent. Long before white smoke curls above the Sistine Chapel, names begin to circulate, whispered in sacristies, debated in embassies, and analyzed in diplomatic cables. And when it comes to an African pope, 3 names dominate the inner conversations, each one a symbol of a different path the church might take. But make no mistake, this is not a popularity contest. Every one of these cardinals is scrutinized, calculated, and ranked behind closed doors. The robes may be white, but the process is anything but. Let's meet the men at the center of this storm. Cardinal Peter Turkson. Of all the African candidates, Peter Turkson is the most Vatican-seasoned. At 76, he has walked the marble floors of power longer than any of his continental peers. But unlike the stiff-boned princes of Europe, Turkson's presence is warm, diplomatic, and grounded in justice. He first rose to global prominence as the president of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace, where he championed bold ideas: climate change, economic equity, and peace in conflict zones. Pope Francis was later appointed head of the Dicastery for Integral Human Development, giving him one of the most influential portfolios in the Vatican. But behind the curtain, Turkson has been a target. His progressive leanings and open critiques of global capitalism made certain Western donors and their allies in the Curia deeply uncomfortable. Leaked memos from 2017 hinted at efforts to marginalize him from key decisions. He was nearly sidelined, not for heresy, but for being too honest about the Church's financial hypocrisy. Still, Turkson remains respected across ideological lines. His theological approach is bridging, not dividing. He's moderate, measured, and unafraid to say that the Church must evolve without tearing itself apart. But his age, just a few years shy of the upper voting limit, may be his biggest disadvantage. Some cardinals are looking for youth, others want certainty. Turkson stands at the intersection, a reformer from within. Cardinal Fridolin Ambongo Basungu. Then there's Fridolin Basungu, and he's everything the Vatican isn't used to. Bold, sharp-tongued, and unrelentingly grassroots, Basungu is 65 and arguably the youngest serious contender for the papacy from Africa. As the Archbishop of Kinshasa, he's not a bureaucrat. He's a field general. He walks through protests, not processions. He speaks to the poor, not the polished. And unlike many prelates who carefully avoid politics, Basungu leans into it, criticizing corrupt regimes, defending democratic values, and challenging multinational exploitation of Congo's resources. This courage makes him a hero among Africa's young Catholics, but inside the Vatican, it makes him a liability. Basungu's links to Congolese civil society groups, some of which are currently under investigation for financial mismanagement, are raising eyebrows in Rome. There's no direct allegation against him, but the Curia keeps files on every candidate, and his file is thick with political activity. His theology is orthodox, but his methods are disruptive. He doesn't speak the cautious dialect of Rome. He speaks with fire, and fire doesn't sit well on velvet thrones. If elected, Basungu would signal not just a new pope, but a new era of confrontation with the world's injustices. For those inside the conclave who want bold change, he is the North Star. For those who fear chaos, he is the storm. And then there is Cardinal Robert Sarah, the paradox in scarlet. At 79, he is nearing the upper age limit, but his following remains strong. Sarah is a darling of the Catholic rite, a staunch defender of Latin liturgy, moral absolutism, and a church untouched by modernity. He served as the prefect of the Congregation for Divine Worship, and during his tenure, he made no apologies for his beliefs, that the church must stand against same-sex marriage, resist the desecularization of sacraments, and return to a purer, more disciplined form of worship. To traditionalists, he is a warrior. To progressives, a warning, and to many moderates, a dilemma. Sarah is the Vatican's Trojan horse. He offers the visual of diversity with none of its disruptive implications. Electing him would allow the Church to say, "We chose Africa," while continuing to operate under a European ideological framework. That's exactly what makes him both electable and dangerous. He would excite some, enrage others, and almost certainly deepen the fractures that Francis spent a decade trying to heal. 3 men, 3 directions, 1 crown. Each of these men represents a different future. None of them is perfect. All of them carry risk. And that's exactly why their candidacies are more than just names on a list. They are symbols of the battle now playing out in secret corridors and whispered alliances. The Vatican knows it must change, but how much and how fast? That's the decision this conclave will make. And these 3 men, for better or worse, are the faces of that decision. But what the world doesn't know is that behind these public profiles lie deeper files, secret fears, and hidden resistance. Behind the tapestries of tradition, the Vatican is not just a spiritual authority, it is a geopolitical fortress. While the world may see the College of Cardinals as a circle of holy men in red robes, inside Rome, it's understood as something far more complicated, a delicate ecosystem of secrecy, loyalty, and self-preservation. This is why, despite the qualifications of African contenders and the Church's demographic shifts, the real question isn't, can an African be Pope? It's, will the system allow it? Because in the Vatican, change is managed, not embraced. At the heart of this resistance is an unwritten but powerful code, the defense of continuity. The papacy isn't just a seat, it's a symbol. To many inside the Curia, the idea of a non-European Pope, especially a Black African, isn't just radical, it's unsettling. Not due to theological concerns, but due to what it represents, the end of Rome's centrality. Many older cardinals, particularly those from Italy, Spain, and Germany, believe that the papacy is not only a global voice, but a European responsibility. They argue that the Church must project stability, and that the next pope must be a figure the secular West, still a financial powerhouse, can understand, engage, and trust. And here's where it gets blunt. Some don't believe Africa is ready to carry that burden. They cite political instability in certain African nations, unvetted media exposure of African cardinals, risk of scandal from associations with NGOs or anti-government movements. These are polite phrases for what in other circles would be called dog whistles. But fear runs deeper than bias. It is institutional. For decades, the Vatican has relied on a network of donors, banking families, and diplomatic relations that are rooted in Europe and North America. These networks prefer popes who keep church finances discreet, papal diplomacy predictable, and ideological shifts gradual. An African pope, especially one who speaks the language of reform, transparency, or political confrontation, would unsettle these interests. He could push for audits of Vatican funds, champion radical social justice over theological neutrality, expose the Church's ties to exploitative regimes or multinational corporations in Africa and beyond. To the average Catholic, that sounds like courage. To the old guard, it sounds like a collapse. And there's another factor: optics without control. The election of a Black African pope would be historic, but if he begins to reshape the Church too quickly, those who supported him for diversity could turn on him for unpredictability. So while some cardinals may vote for an African pope to appear progressive, they may also choose the safest version of that identity, a figure who looks like change but acts like continuity. So, what do you think is going to happen? Should we expect change? Let us know in the comments section. Will merit win? Or will history repeat itself? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.